Music is a scrub woman, clearing away the dirt and grime. Music is a girl child, simple, sweet, and beaming. 1,000 years old, cold as sleet and scheming. Wise and patient, unfathomably
That's the one.
wise and patient, unfathomably, I'm good at this, and that's funny. You rolling?
Mm-hmm.
My name is Bob Power, and I help people make records. Wise and patient, unfathomably kind. Music is the woman you always wanted to find. As fragile as a flower, a single petal of a rose. Unfathomably kind. It's just where it came. Wise and patient, unfathomably kind. That's great. I moved back here from San Francisco in '82, and I was doing every kind of shit gig possible. I was playing a lot of guitar at that time, playing on bad records, playing mafia weddings in Brooklyn, playing, publicly funded lunchtime shows at mental institutions, and I'm not kidding, everything. And I was producing some stuff at a studio called Calliope, and I was doing the overnight shift because it was the only thing I could afford. They were the cheapest hours. The owner would always fall asleep at the console with the sun just peeking over the horizon, and I'd finish off the mix, in my very feeble way, technically, but I knew what I wanted to hear, and I sort of knew how to go about it. One of the engineers who worked there went away for a couple of weeks, so the owner said, "Do you want to fill in?" And I'm like, yeah, sure, I know how to do that. It's the first Stetsasonic record. I think it was On Fire, and my rhyme was on that, and there's a lot of great stuff. Daddy-O was a real visionary in certain ways. In fact, Talking All That Jazz, the second Stetsasonic record, which I did very little on, that record was way ahead of its time, I think, just sonically and what he did with jazz types of things. The transition from being a player to being a sonic technician is an interesting one. And I still, during certain periods of time, if I'm working on a certain kind of record, I pick up the guitar and I play a bunch for 6 months. But I played for so long that I can kind of play whatever I need to, and it's never an issue. So I'm still a little bit there. But that's a very interesting point, because it's very important that when you do something other than be that type of musician, that you focus on doing that as well as you can. There's a lot of guys who, keep thinking, wow, if I could only play, or no, if you do it like that, it'll sound better, and that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be really good at this part of it and facilitating other people on the other side of the glass. And a couple of things. Number one, people say, what's your main instrument? And I say, well, I played guitar for 40 years, but the computer is not my main instrument. The studio is my instrument, and just because I'm I'm fascinated by certain things about all kinds of engineering, not just music engineering. So all the gadgetry and the lights and the knobs in the studio are just totally fascinating to me in very like a childlike way. So there's never been one piece. The recording studio, first time I ever set foot into a multi-track studio was in college in '72. And the media department, which was very small then, because they didn't the word media wasn't much of a word until around then, or at least in the social sense that we accept it now. They got a 4-track tape recorder, and I went in with my guitar, and first of all, the smell of the tape was like, I don't know if you know, tape has this smell. Unfortunately, there's not much tape anymore, but it just really, when I smell that smell, it reminds me of all the times when I was young and I got to go into a recording studio, which wasn't much because you didn't always have the money, and it was so exciting, and that smell still does that to me. But I went in, there was a 4-track tape recorder, and there was an engineer there, and I sat down and played a guitar part, and then sang a part, and then sang 2 other parts, and then bounced some stuff together. Immediately I was like, wow, this is really cool. So the whole multi-track tape experience was a big mind blower for me. And obviously now we're in the days of Pro Tools or any kind of hard disk recording with 128 tracks if you want them. And it's interesting with all that. So a multi-track recorded was one of the things that really kind of flipped me and got me into the concept that the recording studio was a really interesting place to make music. Because I was so involved with low-end theory, in a way that record is almost like the Sgt. Pepper's of hip-hop, you know. It's sort of a record, it was a fulcrum. It was a point at which, it was the point on which so many other things kind of turned and changed and went a different direction. So favorite and important are two sort of different things. Favorite, you know what? For the most part, I really love every record I work on, and that may be flawed, but that's my job. My job is to love it, and I don't mean that in a shallow way at all. I mean that if I can stand to sit in a room with somebody with the music playing a lot for 6, 8, 10, 20 weeks, I better love it. And you can kind of condition yourself. What I'm there to do is help people do their thing. So if I can't, it's my job to get into it. It's like when I play, I've realized, you know, I can play a lot of things, and technically I go up and down, but the real point is to get to the place where it's very compelling because you really mean it. And you know, when you see a good performer, they're like so wrapped up in what they do, and it's so compelling that even if you don't like it, you say, wow, it's heavy. So even as an engineer, that's my job, is to get so into it where, so, you know, maybe somehow a little bit the passion towards the people and the music is something that will help take it along a little bit. Obviously Q-Tip, who is a dear friend to this day. You know, all the guys in De La, Prince Paul, Paz, who's a great producer, Posdnuos. People don't give him enough props. He's really good. Maze. And, you know, Ali and Fife, and, you know, all these people. And then there's a lot of others, and it's kind of funny because I forget, but then when I look on my discography, I go, that was really cool because I learned this or I did that. These people, the influence of all these people is more one of a humanistic nature than it is a technical or a musical nature, though. There are some people through my life, some teachers I've had, whether it be music theory teachers or guitar teachers or you know, whatever, jazz teachers, that have had a big influence on me on that side. But in terms of, you know, the record, making records, you know, everybody I've really ever worked with has sort of been important to me in one way or another. You realize that from everybody, whether it's a teacher that's supposed to be teaching or just somebody you work with, there's usually 2 or 3 really important things you sort of get from every different person. And so they've all been important. You know, Tip and my association with him has been very important. You know, Tip mentioned my name on a record, and all of a sudden, you know, I'm this big thing, you know, and it's funny how things work. And I know I'm going to be leaving people out here who I love, but there's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them. Even people I haven't necessarily worked with, but I've been around in the studio that, you know, just sort of had certain kinds of influences about certain things. The Large Professor, Paul, has had a great influence on everybody and how they make beats and how beats are constructed. And his are very simple, but there was a thing about it, you know. Pete Rock, you know, same type of thing. I think maybe I've done 1 session with Pete, but it was great, you know. Yeah, and anybody I leave out, it's only because my memory's going.